It's Mailbag Fridays. We'll get a mailbag edition of Locked On Braves answering your questions and talking about those Silver Sluggers as well. Braves racked up the awards on Thursday. So we get into all of that, talking on your questions, talking about the offseason, obviously, and everything else that you want to hear on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we talk about your favorite teams every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there to see everywhere I am covering the game of baseball, including the Braves over at TomahawkTake.com. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. And make sure you follow us on YouTube as well, starting to get the subscribers rolling there. So appreciate all the support. And as always, make sure that you subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. Again, I really do appreciate all the support since taking over the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. Obviously, when you win a World Series covering a team, it is always a lot of fun, but been a great ride so far. And I appreciate your continued support in the off season as well. And we'll continue to bring you episodes 5 days a week on Locked On Braves. So make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure you follow us on Twitter so that you get notified whenever we post a new episode. But we are going to be doing a mailbag episode today. So really make sure that you're followed into the social so that you can send me in those questions. You can send them in anytime, but I'll most likely try to save those questions for Friday when we do our mailbag episode, unless those questions, are just really time sensitive. But I will be doing a mailbag episode every Friday. So please continue to submit those questions into LockedOn_Braves or at ShortstopBall, or just tag both of us in your tweet, and we will make sure to read your questions, answer your questions on the show. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today, but want to start it off with some awards. Award season is upon us, and the Braves racked up on Thursday. They had 4 Silver Slugger Award winners. You had Freddie Freeman winning his 3rd straight, Ozzie Albies winning his 2nd, Austin Riley winning his 1st, and Max Fried winning his as well. So Braves are racking up the Silver Sluggers Award. No real surprises there. Pretty cool on the Max Fried front. Could be the last time we see a pitcher win a Silver Slugger Award. But, obviously when you get a walk-off on 4th of July, like Max Fried did, I think that's in a pinch hit situation. I think that's deserving enough to win the Silver Slugger as a pitcher. But all those guys very deserving. MLB.com also listed their ballot for the All-MLB team, which I think is really cool. When they started this back in 2019, really gives you a better idea of the best players at the respective positions, during the season. There is still a fan element to it, a voting element to it, but, they at least give you, players who are deserving, of the nomination, deserving of the spot. And the Braves had 6 players nominated there. They had Freddie Freeman, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Adam Duvall, and then they also had Max Fried and Charlie Morton. I feel like Freddie Freeman is probably a lock for 2nd team. I doubt he beats out Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for 1st team, as Vlad will be a heavy MVP candidate in the AL. Will probably finish 2nd there to Shohei Ohtani. So I think Freddie's probably battling for 2nd, probably should get it, probably deserves to get it. Austin Riley, I think, has a chance to be a 1st teamer. He's going to be pretty close, but at the very least, I think he would be a 2nd teamer. I don't think Ozzie makes the 1st or 2nd team once again, being left off there. I know he's been a candidate a couple of times. I don't think Adam Duvall is a 1st or 2nd teamer either. And then it'd be really tough with Max Fried and Charlie Morton. I think one of them could slip in with one of those last 3 spots. I think there's 7 clear guys ahead of them. I wrote about what my predictions are over on tomahawktake.com if you want to check that out. But I think Freeman and Austin definitely make one of those first 2 teams for the All-MLB team. And I think either Max or Charlie, looking at their seasons, they're both kind of similar. Charlie has them, in strikeout numbers, and Max has Charlie a little bit in ERA. So I think they're both very comparable. Both could be deserving, but we'll see if maybe the votes are split a little bit there. But hopefully at least one of them, hopefully both, makes the second team there. But I think that's very cool. So make sure you go check that out and vote for that as well. Take our first break here, and then we'll come back and start answering some of your questions for this week's mailbag. I love Thanksgiving, all the good food and treats and plenty of them, but maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't full of calories and sugars. It's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it as well. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. Replace the coconut cream pie with the coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. Lots of good flavors to replace any type of pie out there. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, and covered in 100% real chocolate. Built is a great option for when you're hungry. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or 2. Share some at your family gatherings. It will make things less awkward. Maybe Aunt Betty hasn't tried a Built Bar yet, and you can introduce her to that. There's new surprises all month long, limited time flavors arriving at built.com regularly, so check the site often. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday, and mark your calendars. Black Friday will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so our first question in today's mailbag episode comes from Jacob Suttles. Got a couple of questions from Jacob on today's podcast that hopefully we'll be able to get to. But Jacob's first question is, who steps up and becomes our fourth and fifth starters out of Wright, Inoa, Davidson, Muller, Tukey, and Soroka? And he says, for the record, I'm thinking Wright and Inoa. So, he gives me a list here. Honestly, I think we could see a free agent take up one of these spots, maybe another veteran, $5 million or less type starter, take up one of these spots. But if I had to pick out of this group right now, if Soroka's healthy, Soroka's in the rotation. I mean, that's kind of a given for me, but I am a little worried about that and worried about his health, and especially not at the beginning of the season. I think if Soroka's back by midseason, I think that's great. And then, what kind of effectiveness will he have, being off basically for 2 years? So, but if Soroka's healthy, he's in there. I mean, he can potentially top of the rotation type arm. But let's throw him out for now, because I don't think he factors into the equation to start the 2022 season. So out of Wright, Inoa, Davidson, Muller, Tukey, I think Inoa and Tukey are destined for either the bullpen or trade. More so for Tukey. I think he's a definite trade candidate. I think Inoa is probably better built for the bullpen. So that to me leaves it down to Wright, Davidson, or Muller. And I like all 3 of those options. And I think all 3 pitch and start plenty in 2022. I think you got to give Wright a chance here. I know he's had plenty of chances, but, he really kind of put things together at Gwinnett at the end of the last season, and then obviously had the big outing in the World Series. It's one outing. I mean, Bryce Wilson was terrific in one outing in the NLCS, and we see how that has turned out. But I think you got to give Kyle Wright another start, another chance. Maybe it's his last chance, but I think you at least have to give it to him. Go into spring training, let him earn that spot, and I think he gets one of those rotation spots. And then the other one comes down to Davidson and Muller. I'd lean Davidson if he's healthy. I like the steadiness of Davidson. I think there's a little bit more upside with Muller for sure, but I kind of like the steadiness of David, what he's going to give you. That start in the World Series, you can throw that out the window. The guy had not really pitched competitively in a long time, and that's a huge spot to put him in. So, throw that out the window. Davidson's a much better pitcher than what we saw there. So I think it'd be Wright and Davidson, but I think Wright, Davidson, and Muller all get starts. I think Noah at least gets a look in spring training. They at least give him an opportunity, but again, I think he's more destined for the bullpen. I think Tukey is as well, if Tukey is not part of a trade package this offseason. But if I had to predict today who's going to be in the starting rotation to start 2022, I'd go Fried, Morton, Anderson, Wright, and Davidson right now. Again, I would not be surprised if Alex goes out and gets another veteran to put in the rotation, and then you start Tucker, in the minors, let him work there a little bit more. Since he didn't, get a ton of innings last year and had the injuries. So maybe you send him, and I think Muller needs a little bit more work too. So you let Davidson and Muller continue to get those reps, get those innings, and then sign a veteran for the back of the rotation and let him fill up those innings early on in the season until maybe one of them are ready. So if I had to give my real prediction, that's probably it. I think the Braves probably sign a cheap back of the rotation starter this offseason and add Wright to the rotation with those three at the top. So that'd be my prediction now. But if they don't go externally to find a rotation arm, then I would probably go with Wright and Tucker Davidson at this moment. But got a long time to figure that out. But good question from Jacob there. Our next question comes from Steve Lamb. He says, how many of the 4 trade deadline outfield acquisitions do you see being on the 2022 Braves roster? So very common question. A lot of fans have been asking because, obviously all 4 of those guys worked out really well for the Braves and we would like to have them back. The easy answer here is Adam Duvall because he's technically under team control, has a year of arbitration left. Although I would not be shocked if the Braves non-tendered him. He's projected to make around $9 million. I also would not be surprised if the Braves try to work out a little bit of a longer-term deal with Adam Duvall. But I think he's probably the safe bet just because they really don't have a lot of other outfield options under contract right now that you can depend on. I don't think Ozuna plays at all next year. And, there's a chance Acuna's back for the beginning of next year, but that's probably going to be pushing it. It's most likely going to be May. And then obviously, probably will be a little rust there trying to work his way back. So I think they may have to keep Adam Duvall just for the fact that they need a familiar player out there that they can trust, big bat. So I think Duvall's probably the easy answer here. So that's one. And the question was, how many of the 4 trade deadline outfield acquisitions do I see being on the roster? I'll say 2. I think they signed one of the other 3. If I got to pick, I'd choose Eddie Rosario. I just think he is a more impactful bat. He gives you a little bit more defensively, and I like having another left-handed bat. The Braves need another left-handed bat besides Freddie Freeman. So I like having Eddie Rosario in there. I love Jorge Soler as well, and I like what Jack Peterson brings to the clubhouse. So again, I like all of these guys. Duvall's probably the one I like the least, but he's the one that's still under team contract, so the one most likely to come back. But I'll say 2. I think they bring back Duvall, and then I think they're able to bring back one of the other 3. I do think Rosario is likely. I'm not really sure what his market will be. I think Soler's market is going to be pretty massive, especially if the DH becomes universal. I think he may price himself out of what Alex Anthopoulos is willing to pay, but I would love to have Soler back. I just love watching him swing a baseball bat and hit balls very, very far. So I would love to have Soler back, but I think he may have priced himself out of range for the Braves. But I think they do bring back 2. I think it's probably either Duvall and Rosario or Duvall and Jock Peterson. Wouldn't mind having Jock Peterson back either. I don't know what type of impact, he has over a full season. But we know what he brings to the clubhouse, what he brings to the fan base. So there's definitely some value in that. And again, he's a left-handed bat. I talked about with Rosario, the Braves need a left-handed bat in there. So, I could see a Duvall, Jock Peterson reunion there. But again, Rosario would probably be at the top of my list of all 4 of them. followed by Soler, Peterson, and then Duvall, if I had to rank them that way. Let's take another break here, and then we'll come back and answer a few more of your questions. BetOnline is back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so another question from Steve Lamb here that I wanted to follow up on. And I kind of touched on this in Thursday's podcast, but he says, who do you see as the Braves' backup catcher in 2022? So, again, I talked about this on an earlier podcast this week. As things stand right now, I see William Contreras being the backup catcher because Shea Langoliers is ready for AAA. I mean, he spent all of 2021 at AA, which I think was fine. Well, he did get called up to AAA right at the end of the season, but spent the majority of of the season in AA. Proved he can hit there. Obviously, we know the defense is already there, so he's ready for the jump to AAA, and I think that's where you have to start him and play him in 2022. And there's not really room for him and Contreras on the roster. I mean, you can do that, but somebody's going to be losing out on at bat. So I think William Contreras is the backup catcher. Another reason for that is I don't think you can count on Travis d'Arnaud for 130 games. I mean, I think if you get 110 out of Travis, you're sitting pretty well. So I think the Braves kind of back off on him in the regular season a little bit and make sure that he's healthy for the end of the season. He's been prone to injuries throughout his career. So I see the backup catcher maybe not going to a full split of what they had with Tyler Flowers and Kurt Suzuki back in the day, but I see the backup catcher for the Braves in 2022 getting a lot more reps this time around. So I think it would be best to have William Contreras as the backup catcher there. But I could also see a scenario where they bring back a Stephen Vogt type of catcher, a veteran to back up Travis d'Arnaud. I would rather have William take that role at this point. So if it's me picking, I'd go with William Contreras as a backup catcher, but I have a feeling Alex will go out and get another veteran type to back up Travis d'Arnaud there. I don't know that they fully believe in William right now, just kind of get that sense, but it may come down to what happens in spring training too, and the adjustments that he makes and how they feel about him going into the year. But as the roster stands now, what would I do? I would have William Contreras as the backup catcher. And again, I think you're going to see more of the backup catcher for the Braves in 2022, kind of giving Travis that rest and trying to keep him healthy for the postseason. Because you saw in the postseason, Travis ain't coming out of there. I mean, that was pretty apparent, even when he seemed to be, a little injured at times, and the thumb seemed to be bothering him, or his inability to throw out any base runner. It didn't matter, what he did behind the plate, blocking balls, calling pitches. I mean, you can't deny the impact that he had back there. I mean, look at the offenses that the Braves pitchers shut down. A big part of that is what Travis did behind the plate, calling pitches, blocking balls in the dirt. So, I mean, he was very big back there. Again, I know it's frustrating, all the stolen bases that he gave up, but still, him being back there was a big reason why the Braves won the World Series. And the bat started to come alive late as well. So, keeping him healthy, keeping him fresh for the postseason, I think will be important. So I think you'll see that backup catcher play a lot more. And I think it will be and should be William Contreras. Next question comes from Jacob Suttles. His second question from Jacob here. He says, do you think AA will ever extend Dansby Swanson out of his ARB years? And then Brian SWT, sorry, Brian, don't have your full name on here, but Brian asked, and what could the contract look like for Dansby Swanson? So very good question here, because I love talking Dansby Swanson because I love Dansby Swanson. I mentioned on the podcast before, but I love what he brings to the team. I think he's a a winner. I think he is a leader. And so I love having him there. He has the lofty expectations of being a number one overall pick. He is not a number one overall pick. I mean, I think most people know that. If you know a lot about the MLB draft, the number one pick isn't always the most talented player, in the draft necessarily. But Dansby is a very good player. And if you view him as a very good player and not an all-star type player that you want him to be, then I think you can start to appreciate a lot more what Dansby Swanson does for your team. And so just looking at it right now, he is entering his last year of arbitration before he becomes a free agent. So, if this is the time when the Braves are going to, extend Dansby Swanson, now seems like the appropriate time to do that with him entering, obviously, his last year before becoming a free agent. Would I do that as Alex Antopoulos? Would I extend Dansby Swanson? I don't know. I mean, as much as I just talked about how much I love him, and he's set to make around 10 million through arbitration in his final year in 2022 before becoming a free agent. It depends on the deal, right? I mean, I think if you could extend him, he's 28 now. So do you extend him for 2 more years? Do you extend him through his age 20, his age 32 season, which would obviously take him through his prime. He's a hometown guy. He made that very evident during the postseason. Do you extend him through age 32? So tack on, 4 more years here. If you do it like 12, 15 million a year, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the real value there is for Dansby Swanson, but that's kind of where my mind goes. I think if you could extend him for 3 or 4 more seasons at 12 to 15 million a season, I think that's pretty solid for what Dansby gives you. But can the Braves, afford to do that for a guy that's going to be your 7-8 hole hitter? I don't know. I mean, that's a little bit risky, but what else do the Braves have coming up in the system? I don't see another shortstop, banging on the door in the Braves system right now. I'm not as high on Braden Shoemake as a lot of other people are. So I don't really see anybody else prospect wise in the Braves system right now that's going to be ready to take over for Dansby Swanson. So you'd have to go out externally and either trade for a shortstop, which is tough to do, and not a lot of teams willing to give up, their star shortstops, which are their centerpiece. But or you go out and sign a free agent, and you're going to pay a free agent, more than 12 to 15 a year. So I like the idea of keeping Dansby Swanson around for a little while. I think he'd want to stay in Atlanta as long as he can. So I think he'd be open to a somewhat team-friendly deal there. But I just don't know. I don't know where Alex and the team are with that. But I would like to have Dansby around a little bit longer. Again, if you can sign him in that 12 to $15 million range, I think that's pretty fair for the value that he brings you. But let me know your thoughts. Hit me up on Twitter at shortstopball. I know Dansby can be a bit of a controversial topic on Twitter, but I certainly would entertain the idea of bringing him back. You've won a championship with him. I think he's a championship quality player, so definitely would not be against that. But you take a look at what his good friend Ozzie Albies is making, and Ozzie's making $7 million a year over that stretch. That doesn't seem fair. But I think that's probably what Dansby would get in free agency is, 12, somewhere between 10 and 15 million a year. So I think that's what it would take. And again, you're paying him through his prime years, 28 to 32. But I would go for that. I would definitely kick the tires on that, see what can be done, see if you can get a team friendly deal and keep Dansby around for a while. Obviously, he and Ozzie work really well up the middle. Again, you've won a championship with Dansby. I think he's a championship type player. So you can definitely do worse at shortstop, and you have the other key pieces around him already. And hopefully Freddie Freeman, Acuna, Albies. So, and Riley, obviously. So I think that's worthwhile to talk about this offseason, but got some big hurdles to get over first and re-signing Freddie Freeman before we can talk about Dansby Swanson. But I do think those conversations happen this offseason. Whether or not a deal gets done, I don't know. But I definitely think those conversations start to happen. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these other young players, their contracts are going to start coming up soon too. I mean, guys like Max Fried, Austin Riley, those guys getting in arbitration as well. They're going to get a big bump in arbitration soon too. So, you got to consider those factors as well. I would definitely prioritize Max Fried and Austin Riley over Dansby Swanson at this point. Fried has 3 more years left in arbitration. He's set to make $7.1 million in 2022. So, his salary is going to be up in the 10 to 13 millions here over the next couple of years. And then you got Austin Riley, just starting out in arbitration. So he's going to be ticketed. I mean, just won his first Silver Slugger, like we talked about. So, he's going to be looking to get a big bump in salary here pretty soon as well. He's under contract through 2025, I believe. So, you got a lot of other young players coming up who are going to have to get paid, but I definitely would consider signing Dansby Swanson, extending him for a couple of more seasons if you could. I think definitely a solid shortstop. Again, I like Dansby Swanson. I know he can be a little bit diversive out there on the Twitterverse, but let me know your thoughts on Twitter. Let me know what you would do with Dansby Swanson, if you would extend him, or, there's probably people ready to trade him right now and then sign one of the big ticket shortstops that are on the free agent market this offseason. I'm sure there's people that are spinning that idea as well. So, we got some other questions here I wasn't quite able to get to. I'll try to get to them in another podcast, or either I'll save them for next week's mailbag. A lot of them having to do with will Alex Anthopoulos make a big trade this offseason? So I definitely want to get into that, but I'll save those questions for another podcast. So I appreciate all the questions that were sent in. Please continue to send those in to me at Shortstop Ball or at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure you follow both of those Twitter accounts as well, so you get notified whenever I post a new episode. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves, and we will talk to you next time.